Hey, John here, Chief Motivator over at Method 3 Fitness, and I'm joined by Dr. Cody from Symmetry Sports. And we're here bringing you another digital learning experience today, talking about 5 of the most common fault patterns within your squat. All right, so what we're going to do is cover these 5 faults, the most common that happens when you're squatting, and how to overcome them and correct them. Sound good?
That's right.
Cool. So Dr. Cody, for those of you guys that don't know, he's a chiropractor by trade. His Symmetry Sport is located in Los Gatos, correct?
Right.
And Dr. Cody specializes in helping people get out of the pain cycle, rehab some of their injuries, and really get back to what they love to do, whether it be just fitness or life or activities, sports. A lot of triathletes and athletes you work with as well, through movement. So I would call him almost more of a physiotherapist, if that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's legal to say.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Perfect. We're gonna go with it. All right. So I'm going to be his guinea pig today as we talk through some of these. He can kind of move me however he wants to, so you guys can see not only the fault that is transpiring and what you may or may not be doing, but then also how to correct it and fix it. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So after you, sir.
So first one we want to talk about is what we call feet out, duck feet, and the medical community's fixed angle. So and that's a static posture term, and that's really how do you stand when you stand in neutral. And you're resting position.
See a lot of people coming right to that.
Yep.
Wide
That's, you'll see that people who are actually trained in squatting as a big part of their exercise regimen actually end up starting to get worse and worse in their resting posture fixed angle. So what we want to see is we want to see something around 5 to 15 degrees, nothing out near that 45, or some people even go greater. And that's the big fault here is that you start creating a forward translation.
So if I go too wide at 45 degrees here, that's not good.
That's not good.
Okay.
So it's doable, but over time it's going to be a massive strain on that, what we call the medial, which is the inner part of your leg, medial chain of that leg there. So and then you're going to start shifting the hips forward, start affecting the back.
So as I'm squatting, all of a sudden I'm starting to come forward more this way.
That's right. And this is why people do it anyways. People are going to pitch the feet out to clear space. You open up the hips a little bit, you take the ankle range of motion out of the equation. So now I have all this new space that I can squat down, but I'm not doing myself any favors. I'm not activating the muscles that I was hoping to activate by doing a squat, and I start putting a lot of stress on those knees.
Gotcha. Okay. So what's the angle? So this is, and I think there are a lot of people that automatically go to squat exactly like that, pretty wide, without even thinking twice.
Exactly. And this is a great assessment, is just tell somebody to squat. Don't give them any cueing, just squat. That's the go-to. Okay, we have some things to address right out of the gate. That fixed angle is a little too heavy. So bring it in a little bit, and this is automatically going to make people start shifting those knees forward like they like to, and it's going to stop. They're not going to go anywhere. So what do they do next? They're either going to come forward, or they're going to have to actually sit back into a decent squat.
Got it.
So if you notice that doesn't clean things up, if knees start dropping in, if they really start coming forward, then we might have to open up those ankles and start creating a little better, what we call dorsiflexion, which is when the toes start coming up towards the shin. So this movement here is
allowing the knees to translate forward a little bit more. Okay, so fault number 1 is toes are ending up just too wide. We've got the feet out. And the simple correction is bring them back in. And then if people are having trouble squatting with that, that's when we have to get into, okay, how can we loosen up the ankles a little bit and the calves, correct?
That's right, yeah. Okay. Yeah, the calves can be a limiting factor, and that alone will be a test in itself. Where do I feel the restriction? For me, on my left side, I feel it in the front of the ankle. On my right side, I feel it in the calf. So I may need ankle mobilization here. I may just need to do some calf stretches or foam roll my calf on the right side.
Gotcha.
So it's not always created equally, but it's going to be pretty indicative of one or the other.
So where should my toe, if I'm not here, then where should they be, give or take?
Mild.
Okay, so
it's very mild.
Toes not straight ahead / almost feel like I'm inverting this way a little bit, just out a teeny bit.
Yep, and in a controlled environment, slightly in is actually a means I use to correct people's squats that have a heavy fixed angle. So start teaching them how to not rely on necessarily the ankle flexibility, but learn how to actually engage those hips. So now the knees are rotating out, the hips are externally rotating, and then they're going to not need to go so far out.
Okay. Sounds good. Beautiful. Fault number 1.
Fault number 1.
And number 2.
Number 2 goes back to the same thing. So they may not pitch the feet out like this. Feet may be straight ahead, they may have excessive ankle motion. And this is where I see it the most, are people who actually have
Great flexibility.
Yeah, great flexibility. So
we have some coaches here like that, I think.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yes.
Exactly. So I am not like that necessarily. I'm somewhere in between. But yogis are a perfect example. They have a lot of flexibility, and it's by nature. It's not necessarily that they've just done yogas for so long that they have this great flexibility. They're drawn to yoga because they're naturally flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And then, therefore, a lot of times they're drawn away from things like squats and resistance training. So when they do a squat, this is where it begins.
So, and for these people, they have basically, which is going to be hard for you and I to demonstrate, right? They have what you're saying the fault is that the knees are translating too far forward because they have the flexibility to do that. So they can get deep into the squat, which you'll just need to imagine that my heels are actually staying on the floor here, but they're getting so far into the squat that they're here in the squat, but their heels are down.
Yep,
Correct.
heels are down, and they feel planted, they feel safe.
And what's wrong with this movement then?
We know now that the forward translation, the old knees shouldn't go past the toes thing, not necessarily the case anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start putting everything forward and you're not putting anything into that backside, what we call the posterior chain, which is going to be low back, hips, glutes, hamstrings, that's going to be your big control mechanism in that squat. When you take that out of the equation and you start putting everything in those quads, that's the front of the knee. So we may not get actual ACL or meniscus or more structural issues, we'll start getting those knee tendonitis, runner's knee or jumper's knee, whatever you want to call it. And it just looks like this, and then they're frying the quads, and they're never using that backside. So that's when we start getting into faulty patterns, and it defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do with a squat, which is engage that backside.
Right.
And you see, when I do a squat, my knees translate forward pretty far, but I'm not putting all that pressure. I feel everything right here in the glutes.
Right.
So it's getting them to shift back, teaching them how to use that backside, and that's this part of our body that we learn to disengage the most with the old T-Rex
all day. Yeah.
So that back gets down regulated, you have enough flexibility, and you're comfortable using the front side, probably going to
all of a sudden using more and more. Okay, so fault number 2 is actually the opposite. All this translation forward, specifically more in kind of very flexible or hypermobile people that can do it. But that becomes a fault because they're not engaging with some of the posterior chain that can lead to some of this knee tendonitis, possibly runner's knee. And so just so people know that are watching, because they may be a little confused. Okay, well, is it just posterior? So where should I feel it then when I'm doing my squat? What muscles am I really engaging? It may seem a little. We're coming back to like just the basic part of it, but. Just so people in their heads, when they're doing the squat, are going, okay, I feel pretty confident I'm doing this right because I feel it kind of equally in something, because they're going to feel it in the quad still. It's just
you're going to feel it in the quads.
How much, so to speak.
Yeah, and if we're doing just a basic body weight squat, you're not going to feel a lot. But I start feeling a little bit of tension in the backside, in my glutes, maybe a little bit in my hamstrings, and what's going to feel like it's really engaging because part of your safety mechanism is so you don't have to load this fulcrum is the low back. And that may scare people a little bit.
Right.
And that, there's a lot of tension in my low back. Is that bad? No, it's meant to hold you up against
Right. Yeah.
It's supposed to do that. So that's what's going to create that good length tension relationship between the hamstrings and the low back.
On that fulcrum.
Right,
Good.
on that fulcrum.
Beautiful. Okay. So fault number 2 was watch out for the knees translating too far forward. We're on to number 3.
Number 3.
Yes.
So number 3 is going to be what in the fitness community we know as the butt wink.
Yes.
So, and that is people who, generally speaking, they've been doing squats for a little while. You're trained in the squat. You can actually get down. You can sit back and do a squat. Or again, sometimes it's the hypermobile people who can just collapse into that squat, no problem. But then we start seeing issues down right about that 90-degree angle or parallel to the floor with the thigh. That whole pelvis starts to dump.
Yep.
And that's the wink.
So let's you guys can see what this is in action, because I can speak to this and and actually what can happen if you don't do it right. So
that's right.
If I'm going in even with a pretty standard stance, I'm going into my squat and everything's good. I've got the extension here, correct, in my low back. So that means those muscles are on, they're working.
Yep.
And when I get down to a certain point,
right here, you'll start seeing it. So he's shifting forward a little bit, which is what he's capable of doing. And any farther than that, watch as that low back starts rounding, and that pelvis starts dumping.
Right.
And John's actually isn't that bad, but he's
However,
cautious.
Yes, I am cautious because what happens when you apply, in a bodyweight squat, maybe not as much, but as you apply load, right? So for anyone watching that's going to start doing heavy back squats, you can really put your back at risk because ultimately those muscles are in effect almost turning off for a second, which as soon as you turn them back on, your back's not going to really like the fact that you just did a pelvic tilt with X amount of weight on your back.
Exactly.
So that's how I did a slight injury and got to go see Dr. Cody to get back into squatting shape again and be mindful of my wink at the bottom there. So, so how should we make sure that we are, I guess, getting the most of our squat, but being mindful of that area right there?
A couple things that we have to address. We have to address that length-tension relationship on the backside. And with you're a tall guy, sometimes that long lever becomes an issue. So if you don't have the range of motion in the ankles, you need to translate a little farther forward for you to truly come down at the right angles in the hip. Otherwise, you may have to lean a little farther forward, and that's just going to set us up for a butt wink a little sooner.
Right.
So that can be an issue. It shouldn't necessarily be a huge issue. It's usually a training mechanism. So it's tight hamstrings, and it's not so tight of a low back. So again, that seated posture, what it does is that puts us in that wink position. So the low back is loose, those are not engaged. Your abs, which attach to the other side of the pelvis, pull up. Those get locked into that position, and you give those hamstrings slack. So now your brain associates that with, oh, that's my comfortable position.
That's where I want to be.
That's how long my hamstrings are.
Right.
This is how stretched out my low back is. And then you put weight on, and you try to do that, and it's, oh, no, we're dumping.
Right.
So
it automatically wants to go back to where it knows.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you spend an hour in the gym, you spend 23 hours, not say 8 to, in this area, 14 hours a day seated at a computer. It's not setting you up for success in that sense.
So what are some of the ways I can improve? Let's say, well, for a lot of people watching, they can just simply make sure they're coming down to around the 90 degrees and maybe not lower than that. Is that safe to say? Okay. So it's still get a lot of the benefits out of it?
Yeah. So if you can come into a forward fold and you feel like you have a good length in your hamstrings, like, oh yeah, I can put my hands all the way down to the floor, no problem. But I still get that dump. Okay, that's a low back issue. You don't have the strength or integrity in those muscles to maintain that position. Hamstrings kick into gear when they're actually being engaged, they override.
Right.
So doing basic hinges. So stop taking it to those great depths. Learn how to hinge, learn how to create that as your strength and stretch the hamstrings. Rewire that program.
Okay.
You can hold that for 30 seconds. It's surprisingly difficult.
Right.
It starts burning.
So just getting them in the simple position of trying to hinge from the hip, so no bend in the knees, correct?
No bend in the knees.
And just hinging forward.
At the hips, that's the key. There is a rod between these two hips. This doesn't move. This stays at actually a little bit of extension, which is only because your lumbar spine is an extended part of your spine anyways.
So I'm still shifting the hips backwards,
Back,
correct?
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So shifting the hips backward and just holding here.
And holding there.
Got
it. We can up the ante a little bit with that. If you do that, like I don't really feel anything, so put your arms straight out in front of you. I'm going to stop you here, and now hinge again. And tell me when you start feeling it in your low back.
Oh, right there.
Right there.
Yep.
It doesn't take long.
No.
So that's the difference.
Done.
We force you to load that backside, and we force you back versus utilizing that torso lean, kicks into gear like that. So that's a quick way to start teaching your brain how to engage those low back muscles.
Got it.
And if
mini movement, hands against the wall.
Yep.
I'm doing little repetitions right there. Yep. And I feel my low back working right off the bat without having to go down.
That's it. So that should be, I mean, you got back an okay amount, but you should be able to get way back there to where you're almost falling off of your heels because you have enough integrity on that chain that the low back stays engaged and the hamstrings just keep lengthening, keep letting you push back.
Okay, so that's doing twofold. It's getting a little bit of length in my hamstrings, but it's activating my low back a little bit more.
Yep.
So hopefully say, okay, you can get down there in this movement without just saying, you're done, turn off.
Right, yep.
Got it, okay. So when I'm applying load, obviously we don't want to get there. Now what if I'm just doing simple mobility, like a mobility squat where I'm kind of getting some range of motion here, I'm going to hinge,
Yep.
I'm going to come down to my squat, and I'm just getting kind of mobility down here. Is that okay?
That's
Come down
okay.
here without, okay.
Yeah, so we know that to some degree, if you're doing a lot of that, there can be some repercussions.
Okay.
And that's going to be when we're doing, say we're doing air squats, you're having people do 100 as the repetitions, and they're dumping just a little bit at the bottom of each one.
Mm-hmm.
That constant repetition, it's a disengagement and a re-engagement.
Yeah.
So we know that at least in the running community, we're learning more and more that the high cadence, actually going faster with shorter strides, takes less energy.
Right.
Versus the slow it down with the heel strike and then take off. It's the same thing here. You force that thing open, you disengage. To recontract that muscle takes more energy for you to do that than to maintain contraction.
Yep.
And that's what's going to start wearing it out. And as soon as you wear that out, then it's not going to be a disc blowout or anything like that. It's going to be those small little stabilizers.
More susceptible to injury though at that point. So what I wanted you guys to get out of that was with that little wing that you noticed when I did that squat, specifically as you're adding more load, you can be a little more susceptible to this injury or numerous repetitions. So to be able to get down there and work on that range of motion is fine. Say you're doing it for a dynamic warm-up, right? But if I'm going to do 100 air squats or 20 squat jumps, right? I'm going to stop before I'm hitting that range of motion, right?
And that's another great way to just teach that range of motion is you can come down into that mobility squat and then grab your toes or whatever you need to do, grab a pole, get yourself into that low back engagement from there, and then teach it from the bottom up versus the top down. So a couple different ways to learn how to engage the right muscles.
Got it.
Relax the other ones.
Okay, good. Beautiful. All right, we're 3 down.
Number 4.
Here we go.
Going fetal.
Got it. Going fetal.
Going fetal is never a good idea. Unless you are a newborn.
Hopefully I'm not in pain going through that.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you revert back to newborn status, things are not good.
Yeah.
So that is a total dysfunction of stability.
Okay.
So everything in our postural chain, and this is, if you look at it from some of these progressive neuromuscular stabilization programs that start working people from the very bottom with rolling patterns, they start training these things to get you all the way up to standing, all the way up to squatting. We go backwards. So if you don't have that stability because of T-Rex syndrome.
This is why you may see some of these while we crawl sometimes, right? Or we're messing with your brain a little bit. These can be very conducive to making sure that we're using our brain the right way, which ultimately will translate to these movements as simple as a squat.
Yeah,
right.
Getting back to the basics.
Yeah, because there you notice kids are the best squatters out there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so sorry, we got sidetracked there. Yeah. So going fetal, what does that mean as I'm doing my squat?
Going fetal means if you're holding on to something or you're going overhead, the shoulders are collapsing, the upper body, the thoracic spine is collapsing. So whether
I'm loaded or not, I'm coming down, things are good, and then I just
and then the knees come in, the ankles drop in, and that's a protective mechanism. So you get into a serious incident where you have a bad injury, that's where you go. You go to protect, and it's our possum effect or whatever you want to call it, armadillo effect, or roll into our ball, protective shell. That's our instinctive position. So it's always internal rotation and collapsing into the center. Protect your organs, protect your essential elements. So that should have been trained out of you a long time ago. As you learn to stand, as you learn to squat, as you learn to be active, walk, run, and be human, be human, be fit. We learned that as kids. Today's kids are a little bit different story. A little more demands. On the electronic elements, but that all pulls you into fetal position. So if you think about our negative posture throughout the day, that's going to be in that fetal position.
Right. I was sitting there to ask. I'm almost doing that exactly. I didn't realize for hours on that.
It feels comfortable.
Right.
And then sitting in good posture actually feels painful. It's not a good sign. So, but then you're going to go to class and you're going to be there for an hour and you're going to be trying to force your body to get into that good position and engage those positions and come down through complex compound movements. If you're unstable enough, you'll just follow it.
So what are like 2 or 3 simple things people can do to improve that or get out of that feeling?
So we have to ramp up the engagement a little bit. So in everything that pulls us out and back. So everything that pulls us into extension. So even just pulling the shoulders back, this is a basic postural correction called Brugger's position. It's hands out, shoulders back and down, chin tucked in, we just squeeze back.
Got it.
So let's set the upper body up for success. We're opening up those anterior or forward structures, engaging the posterior or rear structures on the upper body, getting that whole system engaged, because that's going to be the core element. That's going to be, if that collapses, the legs don't stand a chance.
So where should, just so people know, like as they're doing this, because I feel a lot of muscles working right now with that, right? I feel this opening up, I feel my shoulder blades, sacral muscles working, I actually feel my glutes engaged a teeny bit as I'm standing, right, under posture. So can you just let people know as you're doing this
So what we call the functional or performance chain is this line of tissue across the scapula through the lats, and you can see he's got this nice little crevice right here between the rhomboids. He's squeezing really well. He's getting thoracic extension. That mid back is opening up, and then it's going to come down over to the glutes, and that's why you're saying you feel that little bit of glute contraction. If we squeeze strong enough through these lats, those glutes are going to engage, and that's a huge piece of the squat, is connecting those two pieces. Upper body, big primary mover, lower body, big primary mover. So we're squeezing all that together, the shoulders are coming back, the hands are opening up. And what most people don't realize is that if you took all the muscles and tissues out of your body, that's anatomical position.
Right.
That's neutral.
Right.
Nobody rests in that position.
Well, and I think to your point, everyone is so, and with this, so we're going for some external rotation as we do this, right? And then because our bodies naturally, like this feels great, just totally doing this.
Yep.
So, okay, so the one main thing we can do for the fetal position or fetal fault, if you will, is just try to activate some of those muscles and be more mindful of the movement itself. So as I'm coming down, if I notice, because I think part of the problem is people not noticing the fault that you're doing, right? It's like when you're going in, okay, right? Yeah, it's like, well, that shouldn't necessarily be, that's not right. So let's be mindful of like, that's not right now.
Yeah.
So be mindful of what's happening if they're starting to come forward, if they're starting to dive in. And then what to do about it is just one exercise, very simply, coming into full extension, externally rotating my hands a little bit, getting to that anatomical position, and feeling the muscles that you pointed to previously.
Yep.
Cool. Something else they can do real quick to...
Yeah, for the legs, you got mini bands. You can wrap it around your knees. That's what we call resistive activation. It pulls the knees in. You instinctively are going to push against that. So you're going to actively push against that. So that wants to actually pull you farther.
Yeah, so this automatically wants to drive me in here, right? So you're saying apply pressure out.
Yep, apply pressure out to it. And then think about that same mechanism up top. You don't have to hold your hands like that, but keep the shoulders back. And then push against that band. And that will fire up the glutes, which will fire up those lats even more. And it just sets everything back up into that external rotation, that postural chain, kicks it into gear.
Yeah, I automatically feel my glute medius working outside of my glutes. Okay, we're on to number 5. We're going to wrap it up.
Number 5, and this is an easy one. It's basic rule here. Don't load it unless you own it.
Don't load it unless you own it. You guys got that? That's good. That's a trademark. Cody Fetal right there.
Yep. But if you're going fetal, if any of these faults are in your basic air squat, your bodyweight squat, don't go load it with 200 pounds. Don't go load it with 100 pounds.
Right.
You can load it with the med balls at 10 pounds. Use it as a counterweight so that it helps you sit upright and helps your form a little bit, kind of ramps things up. But anything above that, you're starting to load it, you're starting to create resistance. Anytime you load a movement with a decent amount of weight, you set that pattern.
Right.
So if you're loading the wink or you're loading the fetal position, you're just training your brain that that's what you want to do more and more.
Right. Until something
goes.
Yeah. Yep. So so fifth fault, just don't load it unless you own it. That's it. That's right. So in the goal, we always are trying to like push our strength and improve our strength, and that's great. But I think the thing we have to remember is you can't run before you walk, right? And so it's like you have to make sure that you're actually getting the movement itself and getting the pieces. and feeling it in the right place. It's one of the main things we're so, I must say, anal about at Method 3 is like making sure that you don't understand just what the movement is, but the muscles that are actually contributing to the movement, because then you can get the brain helping you understand, like, okay, this is the pathway I need to activate this posterior chain, which before now has been completely foreign to me. So last thing I want to do real quick, Cody, is just, you mentioned like the counterweight, a simple few things people can do. We talked about this to activate that posterior chain, pointed out the muscles that it's kind of comprised of. The counterweight, that's a big thing, that a little quick tip hack, if you will, that will help them kind of get in that position.
So what you've worked with your coach, you're giving you the instructions on how to open things up, how to engage, keep a neutral spine, keep the knees from collapsing in. All this does is it changes your center of gravity. So it allows you to sit back with a little more ease without it being so heavy that it's frying your shoulders, but it just helps fire up that backside. It's much like that hinge we did, where you change that dynamic of center of gravity, you force the low back and the mid back postural muscles to kick into gear, and that's everything in your stability in a squat.
Awesome, cool. And what's another ones I think a lot of these muscles we're trying to activate are, I don't want to say foreign to people, but they're turned off a little bit, right? It's like getting them to activate, and glutes is a big one. So I know putting the band around my knees was helpful, not just to get some glute activation, but also to say, okay, make sure those knees are externally rotating a little bit so they're not diving on me, right? What's one or two things you can do to activate some of this back region here for them?
So what we're finding just through the research is now shortened ranges of motion are going to be the most effective for kicking those things on. So doing more deadlifts, doing more squats isn't necessarily the solution. It's back to Jane Fonda. It's glute bridges.
Let's do some bridges. Hey, all right. We got any Method 3 partners watching this. You know what we're talking about, right? On your backside. Toes in the air or not. You like toes in the air?
I like toes in the air.
Toes in the air, okay, optional. Driving to the heels, lifting the hips, engaging the glutes. Super simple, but great for activation with the muscles that you're going to use in your squat.
You're closing down that posterior chain.
Love it.
Forcing them on.
I love it. Sometimes simple is better. Keep it super simple.
That's right.
I love it. So Dr. Cody, there's 5 faults. We just rocked them. I love the last one, really. Just don't load it until you own it. It's great. Anything else you want to add at all?
No, I think those are the basics. And beyond that, it's don't overdo even the correctives.
Right.
Don't overcompensate into the other direction. It'll cause its own issues.
True.
So
it's all about balance.
But most people don't have that problem. So just own these basics.
Yeah.
Talk to your coach. Figure out the correctives, and don't load it before you own it.
That's it. Cool. So, hope you enjoyed this digital learning experience. Hope these few tips, if you walk away with just 1 or 2 that makes your squat better, it's going to help you prevent injury. It's going to help you actually perform better, which are all key and crucial things. If you want any more information about Dr. Cody, what he does, or if you're suffering from something like a knee or ankle, or like a low back, like me, go see him, symmetrysport.com.
Yep.
Correct?
That's it.
And he'll take good care of you. So, that's all for now. See you guys next time.